Smack Boy's reaction, back at another reaction for the second time.
All right, relax.
we got
Tape.
we got Dave with us, and we got brothers turned mass killers. I don't know. They didn't say if they was twin brothers.
Today we are going to be covering a case so horrific that it will leave you speechless. The notorious Wichita Massacre. I must warn you, this one is extremely disturbing. And if you're anything like me, it will have you double-checking the locks on your doors and constantly looking over your shoulder for weeks to come. So if you can handle it, let's dive in, because the twist at the end of this one is absolutely mind-blowing. Our story begins with Reginald and Jonathan Carr, two brothers from Dodge City, Kansas, who shared an especially strong bond, one that would eventually lead them to work together to commit a massacre.
No, they brothers. Look at that nose.
They look alike. The
They
nose,
do,
the
right?
lips.
Yes, he was a little light skinned.
Yeah, and especially when they was younger with them glasses.
If he had dreads, they damn sure would look alike.
Remember when he was younger, they both had glasses.
Oh shit.
The young men had endured a rather rough childhood, as after the death of their 2-year-old sister caused the family to spiral into dysfunction, they had to grow up fast. It has been alleged that abuse and neglect were prevalent in their formative years, and some family members have even come forward with allegations that Reginald and Jonathan were victims of violating assaults that we cannot discuss in detail here on YouTube, purportedly at the hands of their mother's various boyfriends over the years. By the time Reginald was 18, he had been through his fair share of physical altercations in school. Meanwhile, his younger brother Jonathan, at only 16 years old, had even attempted to take his own life whilst in high school. By the time the Carr brothers reached their early adulthood, neither of them were strangers to local law enforcement. 22-year-old Reginald and 20-year-old Jonathan were said to have had a lengthy criminal record, one that they intended to make even longer if given the chance. And unfortunately, that chance would come sooner rather than later. The two ended up traveling to Wichita, Kansas, with the intention to do something that neither of them had ever done before. And one cold night, soon after their arrival, a young man named Andrew Schreiber unfortunately found himself in the wrong place at the very worst time. Keep in mind, it was winter in Kansas, and the temperature had been dropping below freezing, so most people had chosen to be safe and cozy within their own homes. But not everyone was so lucky. Andrew was intercepted at gunpoint while returning to his vehicle after shopping at a convenience store, and his captors drove him around to different ATMs, forcing him to withdraw money for them before taking him to a remote area, shooting holes into one of his tires and leaving him there. Now, this event is interesting because although many people think of it as the first stop on the brothers' crime spree, only Reginald was ever actually convicted of this crime, and Jonathan was found not guilty in relation to this incident, meaning that whoever Reginald's accomplice was remains unidentified to this day. Only 3 days after the attack on Andrew, Reginald and Jonathan were driving through neighborhoods in Wichita when they stumbled upon a woman who had been sitting in her car parked in her driveway. Some sources report that the brothers had actually intentionally followed her home. Either way, to the Carr brothers, she seemed like the perfect target, especially because the woman, Linda Ann Walinda, was 55 years old and wasn't much of a match for both of the men. Anne, a cellist and a librarian, was extremely startled when one of the brothers approached her vehicle seemingly out of nowhere and indicated to Anne that he needed help. Anne complied and rolled down her window to see what he needed. The second she did so, she found that the stranger's expression had changed completely, and he raised a gun to her eye level. Anne had been so startled by the sudden change of the situation that she instinctively went to start her already running SUV, causing the engine to sputter and grind. As she rushed to put the car in reverse in an attempt to escape, one of the brothers fired 3 shots into Anne. One of the bullets ended up severing her spine. Somehow, in her pain and confusion, Anne managed to pound on the horn of her car, getting the attention of her neighbor across the street, who called the police. Almost immediately, the Carr brothers fled. When officers arrived at the scene of the crime, Anne's attackers were nowhere to be found. Anne was quickly rushed to the hospital, where she was able to give a rather basic description of the 2 men who had ambushed her and the car that they had been driving in. The descriptions that Anne provided to police were not much, but they were enough to lead investigators to assume that they were potentially dealing with the same attackers who had targeted Andrew just days before. Unfortunately, the gunshot wounds that Anne had sustained proved to be fatal, and shortly after the incident occurred, Anne died.
She got hit
I
in
wonder if the
car.
brothers were planning to rob Ann here, or if they were just killing for the sake of killing. It would soon become evident that these crimes brought them some sick sense of entertainment, but in 1,000 years I couldn't have predicted how twisted their fantasies were about to get. Despite having just gone to a shocking new extreme, the Carr brothers were far from done. So they made another attempt at satiating their desire for violence. And at this time, it was far more gruesome than anyone could have imagined. If you were disturbed by sensitive and graphic discussions, this is your last chance to bow out before it gets truly dark. On Thursday, December 14th, 2000,
Yes.
You sure?
Are you sure?
What you think they're gonna do? I'm thinking they saying crazy, so I'm thinking like, make sure y'all comment what y'all think about to happen since I paused it. Don't try to cheat or none of that. Just comment what y'all think. I'm thinking since he took the way he talking, it gotta be like, but it says mass killers, and he only killed one person so far, right?
2.
Mass killing, yeah, but mass killings is like more than one person at one location.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we don't know yet, but I'm thinking chopping somebody up. What you thinking?
I don't know. It could get real wicked. It was abused
Yeah.
for years.
I'm thinking chop somebody up.
Physically.
whose identity has been kept secret for her own protection and privacy.
Or they could have ran in somebody's house and tied them up and killed them. That sounds right about up the alley.
But is referred to as Holly G, had gone to spend the night at her boyfriend's home. Holly's boyfriend, Jason Befford, was a science teacher and coach who lived with a few roommates, 27-year-old financial analyst Bradley Haka and 29-year-old priesthood student Aaron Sander. Together, the three young men coexisted and occasionally welcomed the company of their respective girlfriends. At the beginning of that fateful evening, Holly arrived at Jason's apartment with her pet schnauzer, Nikki, at approximately 8:30 p.m. Jason wasn't home yet, so his roommates let Holly into the apartment while she waited for him. Holly went into Jason's room and proceeded to watch some television aimlessly. And as she was a teacher herself, she passed the time grading papers. Aaron's former girlfriend, Heather Muller, who was a church preschool teacher, arrived shortly after, and as the time passed throughout the evening, she found herself sleeping in Aaron's bed, while Aaron slept on the couch downstairs. Bradley, meanwhile, slept in...
What did I say? They talk about people sleeping in their houses. They ran into somebody's house. That was the last thing. I said either chop somebody up or they ran into somebody's house. Cause that sounds like about up their alley. They robbing niggas. They doing all kind of shit. Y'all gonna run into somebody's house.
Another room that was located in the basement. When Jason finally arrived home, he locked up the unit before entering his bedroom and joining Holly in his bed. As the silence of the night fell over the household, none could have prepared themselves for the kind of unexpected horrors that laid ahead for them. Shortly after 11 p.m., the front porch light came on. Jason and Holly were still awake, and they waited in tense silence as they tried to determine what exactly had caused the light to activate. But before they could investigate further, the couple heard what sounded like muffled voices. Then, the muffled tones turned into full-blown shouting. To both Jason and Holly's surprise and horror as they laid in bed, a stranger managed to force open the door to the bedroom. The second after Holly's eyes focused on the stranger, he tore the sheets off of the bed, exposing the couple. Moments later, another tall man entered the room in a similar manner, dragging their friend Aaron in from the living room before tossing him onto the bed with Holly and Jason, and asking the three terrified individuals if anyone else was in the house at the time. Both intruders were holding guns. Despite their better judgment, Holly, Jason, and Aaron revealed to the intruders that Bradley was sleeping in the basement, while Heather was in one of the other bedrooms. The Carr brothers grabbed Bradley and Heather and brought them into Jason's room with the others. Once the entire household was in one place, the group quickly realized that they had no way to deal with these two armed men holding them captive. Reginald and Jonathan then ordered everyone to take off all of their clothes and hand over any money that they had on them. They also complained that someone needed to shut up Holly's dog, or they would shoot it.
You don't have to flip sport.
You know them little dogs, they get to barking, get to going crazy. Like, shut this little shit up. That dog was probably going.
The Carrs made it clear that they were no longer interested in money. They had
Dog
something
that
more
don't
sinister
protect
on
you.
their
What they there
minds.
for?
Reginald and Jonathan forced the
It was a
victims
big
into
dog,
Jason's
dude.
bedroom
It was the
closet.
action.
Then, in different groups, they would bring them out
Go
into the
for it
hall
at the
and make
door.
them
You
sit
talking
near the
about
household's
light on
bar
the roof,
and force them to
roof,
engage in intercourse with one another. Someone urinated in the closet out of fear. Throughout the incident, the Carrs forced all of the men and Heather to engage in non-consensual intercourse with Holly. Aaron had recently become a divinity student and could not bring himself to do so, but he eventually complied after being hit hard in the back of the head. Eventually, the Carrs sent Holly back to the closet and replaced her with Heather, who underwent the same horrific treatment. Once the Carr brothers had forced the entirety of the group to partake in their plans, they proceeded to ask who of the victims had ATM cards. Reginald took the victims one by one to nearby ATMs in Jason's own pickup truck. He then forced them each to withdraw as much money as possible, ending up with around $2,000 total from all of the victims. While Reginald was away, Jonathan decided to take the situation into his own hands. Jonathan brought Holly out of the closet and proceeded to assault her as well. Once he was finished, he then did the same to Heather. After Holly's trip to the ATM, Reginald proceeded to assault her as well, before Jonathan again violated both young women. But Holly was the most scared when Reginald spoke one simple sentence. "Relax, I'm not going to kill you yet." Once they were satisfied, the Carr brothers ransacked the house and searched for valuables. As they did so, they came across an empty coffee can or a popcorn box. This detail is debated. Under Jason's bed, inside of the can or box was an engagement ring. The men swung open the closet door and shouted, "Whose is this?" Jason weakly raised his hand, and the intruders asked him if it was the only one of its kind.
Like, why does it matter? Right? Oh, because he's looking for more jewelry. Okay.
With a sad, flat expression, Jason nodded, looked at Holly, and croaked, "That's for you. I was going to ask you to marry me." That's how Holly found out her boyfriend had planned to propose on Christmas Eve.
But it's already
Unfortunately
too late.
for the couple,
That's why, like, right there would have made me not want to kill him. But I would have never killed him anyway. But it's too late because these niggas over here graping shit. It's too late. Y'all already did too much.
that ring would never end up on Holly's finger. About 3 hours after the hellish night had begun, the brothers led all of the victims outside into the yard. One by one, they were forced into 2 cars and taken on a short drive away from the house. Once both vehicles came to a stop, the Carr brothers forced everyone into an empty soccer field and told them to kneel. The most horrible feeling flooded over each of the friends as it dawned on them what was about to happen. "Oh my God, they're going to shoot us," Holly cried. One at a time, Reginald and Jonathan shot each of the victims before watching the young friends bleed out in the snow. The silence of the dark field interrupted only by each friend pleading for their lives, but to no avail. Holly was last, and after this final bullet was fired, the brothers kicked her limp body so it fell face down into the snow alongside the others. Then the Carr brothers ran over each of them with a truck before speeding off into the night. The scene was absolutely horrific, but despite the brutality of their actions, the Carr brothers had almost pulled off the perfect crime. Almost. This is where things get absolutely insane and almost unbelievable, but that night, a real miracle took place. You see, once the attackers had driven away, a disoriented Holly realized that she had actually survived the attack. She had been shot in the back of the head, but the bullet itself had not killed her. Rather, she had played dead until she was sure that the brothers were not coming back anytime soon. But how in the world had she made it out of this dire situation alive? Well, it turns out, she had a hair accessory to thank. Holly's unlikely survival was due to the fact that the bullet had struck a plastic barrette she wore in her hair, deflecting the killing blow. I find it so crazy to think about her putting that hair clip in the morning before, having no idea that it would end up saving her life. But still, Holly was far from out of the woods. She frantically checked her companions, rolling her boyfriend Jason over to find blood coming from one of his eyes. All she could do was take off her sweater, the only scrap of clothing she had left, and tie it around his head in a feeble attempt to stop the bleeding. Her bravery and ability to think clearly in such a traumatic situation is admirable, but it is heartbreaking to imagine how terrifying
I
and
know he
devastating.
mad, nigga, when he find out the news story and shit. They like 2 people dead, nigga. 2 people dead. Like, what the fuck? Got this bitch alive. I shot this bitch in the back of her head, buddy. Like, I know that bitch dead. What you talking about?
How sad these moments must have been. She knew that the rest of her friends were either dead or in extremely critical condition, and even though she probably...
There's 4 people? I thought it was 3 in the house.
They had the nigga in the basement, the nigga
Yes.
in the other room, the
Yes.
nigga with the bitch,
Yeah.
and then another bitch.
Felt weaker and more drained than ever before. She knew the only option was to leave right away and get help. Barefoot and naked with a wound in her skull, Holly found the strength to get help. She ended up running more than a mile in the 17.6-degree weather, through snow, across a field and construction site, around a pond, and through the brush, until she finally spotted a house that had white Christmas lights on in the distance. Frantically crossing over several fences, some with barbed wire, Holly cowered and felt a rush of fear every time a car passed on the nearby road. She had no idea if any of those dark vehicles were the brothers coming back to finish the job, and so she would quickly lie down in the snow again and again to camouflage herself. But finally, she reached the residence. She began to bang on the door, pleading for someone to help her. A couple answered the door, and although they were shocked at the sight of a naked woman covered in blood at 2 a.m., they kindly wrapped Holly in a blanket before offering to call the police. Holly was afraid that she would die before help arrived, so she recounted the entire night to the couple and later a 911 dispatcher as fast as she could. When the police pulled up outside, Holly was in fact still alive and was subsequently questioned before she was sent off to the hospital, where she ended up surviving her wounds, which included a fractured skull and frostbitten feet. But sadly, her friends and dog were not so lucky. After the Carr brothers had shot everyone, they returned to the house and killed Holly's dog with a golf club. I have no idea why they would feel the need to do this, but I guess I shouldn't even be surprised at this.
Dog, they felt like they could use anything to kill it. Then hit the shit with a golf club like that is fucked up.
Now, I find what happened next really intriguing. So law enforcement goes to the apartment where these atrocities had just occurred so they could secure the crime scene. And when one of the officers was standing out
to the house just to kill the dog, they was crazy. That dog was barking and doing all that shit. He wanted to kill that dog. So he went back to kill the dog. For what? The dog can't tell on you. What the fuck the dog gonna do? Yeah, I seen two niggas come in. They came in through the... Like, what the fuck? You just killed... Like, y'all went back to kill it. But how do they know they went back to kill a dog? Then again, right? Then they could have killed that dog before they left out to do everything.
They obviously got evidence.
Yeah.
he noticed something very peculiar. A car was driving by, which was already a little strange since it was 4 a.m. in a secluded residential area with very little traffic. Not to mention the snow-packed streets made driving very difficult. But he caught onto a small detail that ended up being extremely telling. The driver stared straight ahead the whole time while passing, not once acknowledging the obvious crime scene surrounded by police tape. And then the vehicle headed back in the direction it had first come from. This was so suspicious that the officer took down the license plate number and instructed a sergeant to pull the car over and identify the driver. When the man behind the wheel handed over his identification, it turned out that it was indeed Reginald himself. However, at this point, the officers didn't have enough information to know their culprit was right in front of them. And so after a short stop, Reginald was allowed to continue on his way. From what I could gather, it seems that police were only on the lookout for Jason's stolen truck at this point, and so the white Plymouth that Reginald was driving didn't alert them. But get this, he was actually on his way to swap cars with Jonathan, so little did he know he had just escaped by the skin of his teeth. It wouldn't be until later that morning when Reginald went to his girlfriend's apartment that the jig would finally be up. That's because one of the neighbors who was watching the news was horrified to notice that the exact pickup truck police were looking for in relation to a quadruple homicide was parked outside, right next to his own vehicle. The man watched as someone carried a big TV out of the pickup truck and into their apartment, and then he quickly ran to his car and sped to the nearest police station to report what he'd observed. Sure enough, when officers arrived at the apartment complex, they were sickened to see the discarded bedding and clothing of the 5 friends who had been attacked strewn around the area. When police knocked on Reginald's door, he actually moved like he was going to jump off a side balcony to escape. But it was too late, and he was surrounded. Meanwhile, Jonathan was in store for his own rude awakening. He had been staying with a friend and was shocked when she confronted him in the morning about the news reports, after she realized that he was wearing the exact clothes police said their suspect had on, as well as the fact that one of the cars authorities were looking for was parked right outside. Reginald's girlfriend had reportedly described the white Plymouth that Jonathan now had to police. At first, I couldn't believe Jonathan didn't take the time to at least change his outfit for this very reason. But then I remembered, oh yeah, he didn't think they left behind any witnesses, so why bother? He hesitantly asked his friend how she knew about all this stuff, and boy, was he floored when she explained that one of the victims had actually survived the brutal attack. Long story short, the police were soon called, and after a brief foot chase, Jonathan was apprehended as well. And get this, one chilling detail I found while researching was that while he was riding in the car following his arrest, he asked what capital murder was, how the death penalty was administered, and whether a person who received a lethal injection felt pain. I just find these questions kind of eerie considering how little empathy he had for the helpless victims just hours earlier. Ultimately, the Carr brothers were linked to the other recent crimes in the Wichita area. The state charged each of the brothers with more than 40 counts, including murder, and the jury returned separate guilty verdicts. As I mentioned earlier, both brothers were convicted when it came to the Ann Walenta shooting and the quadruple murder, but Jonathan ended up being acquitted of all counts related to the carjacking of Andrew Schreiber. In the end, they were both sentenced to death, though their final sentence has been up in the air for years, as debates over the death penalty continue. On a slightly lighter note, reports say that during the trial, Holly and Andrew Schreiber comforted each other, and it is believed that the two eventually started a relationship and years later got married. The Wichita Massacre is a terrifying story, one that forced...
Who started a 10-year relationship?
Death, though their final sentence has been up in the air for years, as debates over the death penalty continue. On a slightly lighter note, reports say that during the trial, Holly and Andrew Schreiber comforted each other, and it is believed that the two eventually started a relationship and years later got married.
Dude from the first
The Wichita
case, when he jacked him, made him run around and take out his ATMs and stuff like that, and then they shot at the tires and drove away. That dude. He ended up dating the girl from the 4 murders.
Oh, trauma bond.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Massacre is a terrifying story, one that forces all who hear it to wonder why the Carr brothers committed such heinous crimes. A former FBI agent summed it up best when he
What
admitted,
you just called it?
A trauma bond?
The fuck is that? I never even knew that was a word for it. That does match it very well.
Yeah, that's what it is. A trauma bond.
Damn, that's crazy.
They went through the same trauma.
But for $1,000? All you got was $1,000 in the ring.
$2,000.
He got to split that with his brother.
Oh yeah, true. But it wasn't about robbing. It wasn't about getting nothing.
So they just wanted
it was
to
about killing.
They're just doing dumb shit. Nah, I think they wanted money. That was the whole point.
That wasn't.
Yes. Because look, you robbing niggas. It could be like this. We don't know, but they could have been selling drugs and owed the plug. And now nigga, the plug like, nigga, I need that. Like, you feel what I'm saying?
No,
so
they
now they
like, said they was in a gang violence or something.
No, police don't know that because that's only if I tell you. You don't know what I'm. You gonna ask me when I get to the precinct, why did you do all this crazy shit? I don't have to tell you why. I just say, nigga, I don't want to talk to you. I killed them people. I did what I did. They was on a robbery spree. And it just got out of hand.
No.
Yeah, they robbed the first
They
victim.
didn't rob the lady. They only robbed the first victim, and they only took money from the 4 people.
Yeah, they robbed everybody they ran into.
No, they didn't.
No, the lady they was going to rob and they shot her. They was going to rob her and they shot her.
So why they didn't go up in her house or nothing?
No, she didn't make it to the house. They got her at the car, like they did the first victim. The first victim, the white guy.
Or why not wait for her to go in her house? Y'all follow her the entire time until she got home and shot her up.
That's true too. No, but shit just go wrong. Like nigga pulled the trigger early. One of the brothers that didn't know what he was doing pulled the trigger early. And it's probably like, nigga, I'm holding the gun next time. Give me that shit. You know what I mean? He fucked up. He pulled it too early.
No, he got out too early. You didn't let her get out her car, stop her car.
Exactly, but he already
all she did was driving her driveway, and they pulled up on her.
And then the other brother went to the other side of the door and tried to open it up. And then a struggle must have happened, and that's why he shot. Something must have happened, and he shot.
No, all she did was roll down the window. She was trying to back up and reverse, and she couldn't because she was just in shock.
Yeah, they said that.
Look, go back.
Mommy.
Yeah, but that's what it is then. That's what make him shoot her. I'm trying to rob you, and you over here.
And the one that was in front of her didn't shot. It was they don't know which one.
Yeah,
Which one shot.
And you trying to get away. That's probably what did it. I don't know.
Because why would you go up to the car if she's getting out the car to go home? Y'all followed her home.
Yeah.
They said her neighbor. She
but they probably was
her neighbor.
But they probably was gonna take her in the house, but she did that little car shit with that. The car's already on. She trying to do that. She trying to put it in reverse and do that. So he probably broke up like, damn, she trying to get away. Bow. Niggas do dumb shit when people try to get away. Make sure y'all comment, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. They was